Но ти понеже каза, че и по-късно ще може да се гледа и...
We should be live.
Amazing.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Actually. So, welcome to everyone. We are today with Raya Yunakova, and we have very interesting and very special topic for discussion about startups in the context of situation which we have now around pandemic and COVID, startups in general, startups in CEE, and startups in Bulgaria. Raya is one of the probably most experienced people who work in this area about investment in different startups, and now she's actually investment manager in LAUNCHub. So it is really something very interesting that we can talk now today with Raya about opportunities for startups. So welcome, Raya.
Thanks, Misha. Very happy to be here, and yeah, very happy to reconnect with the community. I'm very curious to know who's on the live stream because I'm sure I know some people, but I guess we'll chat after.
Because we are streaming in different platforms, actually from different platforms we can have different people, but I saw some people who are not from Bulgaria registered. So that's the reason actually to start in English, which is probably better also for the future replay of this streaming. So we will see in our dashboard exactly questions which people make via chat, but it will be not possible to have questions in such kind of meeting setup just because we are streaming.
Sure, yeah.
So probably we can start with some obvious things which is good to discuss. Who are you, Raya, and how you started to work with startups?
Sure. So yeah, I've actually been working with startup for yeah, the majority, if not all, of my career so far. So I started working quite a while ago. It's nearing 15 years. Will be soon. So I started actually as a software developer in a small Bulgarian outsourcing company. And I was doing web development at the time for large companies like BT, Reuters, and so on, some banks. And at the time, I was at university. So with most of my friends, we were doing pretty much the same thing. So we were all working for various companies, not necessarily just outsourcing, but we were all working as software developers. And a few friends and I, actually 3 of my friends and I, we're having a chat, and we thought, you know, what would be really cool, it would be to create our own product. Because, and I'm sure there's plenty of developers on the line. A lot of the times when you're a developer and you work for someone else, somebody comes to you and asks you to do something very specific, either to create a system or a certain type of functionality and so on. And especially when you're in the beginning of your career, you don't get many opportunities to create something yourself. So we actually decided it would be really cool to create our own product. So what we did with those 3 friends, I'm sure some of you know them as well. We decided to create our own project, and we thought, what should we do? Because we had the development skills, not necessarily had the business idea at the time or any idea at all what we wanted to create. So we started brainstorming, and we came across this competition that was run by Microsoft at the time, that was posing the challenge to solve the world's greatest problems along the lines of the UN Millennium Goals, and those kind of highlighted a few areas of you know, areas of improvements in life that you can do in healthcare, in environmental sustainability, the works, and education was one of them. So we thought, you know what, we feel education is probably the closest to our hearts. So we decided to create an educational product. We coded it. We used some pretty fancy new technology for its time, which allowed our goal was basically to make students, primary school students more specifically, more active participants in the classroom by giving each one of them a computer mouse, like just a regular one, that all connects to one PC, and create a bunch of games and activities around the lesson. And instead of the kids just sitting and listening to the teacher and trying to memorize what they're being told, we wanted to give them the opportunity to act and to engage with the lesson. So we called that originally called that mind point, because it was the idea that with your mind you point on the screen. And then later it evolved to a company called Nimero. So what happened was actually we created the product, and through the help of Microsoft, we actually presented it in front of some school teachers who turned out to like it. And we thought, well, if you like it so much, maybe we can sell this product to you. So that's how we actually started our first company. So that was way back in the beginning of my startup journey. And yeah, things evolved since then. We worked, or I worked on the company for a while. The company is still going, by the way. And the product is still active, which I'm very proud of. My code wasn't replaced until only a few years ago, so yay. And yeah, then through that competition as well, I got introduced to the team at Microsoft, and at one point they started looking for someone to take over their relationships with software developers, students, startups in the region. Actually, startups came a bit later. So yeah, they offered me to apply for a role with the company. I did. They liked me, and I started working over there. And because of my startup affiliation from before, I continued actually working with the startup community as well. So yeah, that continued. I don't know if you want me to go through the full through my full history, but I worked with Microsoft for a number of years, and for the last 4.5 years, I've actually been working in VC. So I switched sides and decided to go on the investment side rather than the actual startup side. But I am very close to field.
Yes, I remember that we met first time, I don't know, 2010 or 2011, when you used to work for Microsoft, and you was exactly in such kind of role, like evangelist, focused on actually involving of universities in different technological initiatives. But our discussion is mostly focused on startups ecosystem investment, and because you spent several years in UK, where actually you grow in this area, probably it will be great if you can share some insights exactly about this, how you started in UK and what is specific there, and after that what you see like similarity and differences in CEE and especially in Bulgaria.
Sure, yeah. So my touch points with VC began before I went to the UK, actually back in 2012 when the first Bulgarian funds were created in the country, and I got introduced to LAUNCHub and 11 at the time. And I thought I got really. It was actually a really funny story, because I went to this startup event when one of the funds was presenting what they were doing, and they said, "Oh, we have a partnership with Google and blah blah blah." And I was like, "What? Like Google doesn't even have an office in Sofia, so and I'm here. You should be having a partnership with Microsoft." So I kind of. It felt like a challenge to me personally to make that happen. So that's how I initially got introduced to the world of investing. And then when I was doing that on behalf of Microsoft at the time, and in 2016, in the beginning of 2016, I moved to the UK to do the same job over there, with the idea that, you know, I'm familiar with things in Eastern Europe. I was covering a region of 24 countries at the time, and they were all very similar to Bulgaria. Actually, Bulgaria was one of the larger countries in my region. And I thought, that's all great, but we're just in the beginning of our startup journey as a region. So I wanted to see how things are working in a more advanced hub with more experience in the field. So I decided to move to the UK. And it turns out that things actually work very similarly, which was a surprise to me. So That's how I decided to join actively the venture world, and I got a job in a fund based in the UK. So yeah, things actually work quite similarly between Bulgaria and the UK, and I guess this is one common trait for all of Europe because we kind of have a very similar way of doing things. But there are also massive differences. One of those is probably the most obvious one, which everyone expects. The engineering talent is massively different between Eastern Europe and the UK. It is really weird because when we start companies in Bulgaria, and it was the same thing with my startup actually. We were 4 developers, no sales skills, no business skills whatsoever, and we had to learn those on the go. The UK has the reverse situation where they actually are mostly business people starting businesses. They have no developers. And that is probably the biggest difference between the two regions. I would say if you ask me which one is, I guess, easier, I would always opt for have an engineer and learn to do sales rather than the other way around, because in my time in Eastern Europe, I've seen many people start as engineers and learn how to do sales for their startups. I've never seen one business person in the UK learn how to code. Or it was, okay, that's not entirely fair. Some of them were using tools like Wix and Shopify and stuff like that, but it's not, it's not like proper coding like we know it. So that's one major difference. The other one is obviously funding. There's a lot more money going around in the UK, a lot more funds established in the country itself, and just the scale of funding is vastly different. Actually, the UK as a market outperforms the next 3 markets, I believe, combined, which is France, Germany, the Netherlands. So the startups in the UK get more funding per year than the next 3 markets combined. So the scale is vastly different. Yeah.
There is the interesting point. What is the advantage actually to have a startup here in CEE and Bulgaria, and how startups here can be competitive? Is there something regarding to the new situation where everything is remote which stay better? Because in the past I remember that if some startups needs to have the next level of funding, they needed to present in front of different venture capitalists, different funds, and they needed to go on site to do that in different locations. What is the difference now?
So I'll start with the advantages of starting a company in the region. Actually, it's I feel like it's much easier. So capital aside, so capital is one of the bigger challenges that we have as a region. But actually, when you have capital in the UK, for example, or in a Western European hub, you spend the majority on that capital on developers and on technical people, and they are extremely expensive and even more difficult to find than they are in our region. Whereas here, everything is first of all, I think most people have at least a friend that has some background in engineering or in software developer. So it's much easier to secure the talent to actually develop your product. A lot of the times companies in the UK actually reach out to Eastern European companies that are now starting to specialize in developing MVPs. So the first versions of the products that companies are building, they're specialized. I don't know about Bulgaria, but there are certainly ones that I've come across in Serbia, in Slovenia, in Ukraine, and Russia, in Belarus as well. Some in Latvia. So there are entire businesses being started with the specific purpose of creating MVPs for Western European startups who are just business people and don't have the technical talent. And I can tell you they're charging them Western European rates. So access to people or having the skill set to actually build a product is much more easily gained in Eastern Europe compared to Western Europe, and that is a massive advantage. Things in general are cheaper. Like even if you want to go and pay for an office, it's much cheaper. I'll give you an example. So in London, if you want to get a hot desk in a co-working space, it's not even your own desk. You just essentially get a card to access the building. You pay. It starts at about £350 a month. That's for one person. And for £350 a month, you can have a whole office here. So having the advantage of everyone being in the same place is also important for the early stages of the company. Now, that being said, with everything going remote, we're having to adapt, both the startups and us on the venture side. So you're absolutely right. I think barriers have fallen and distances have decreased massively since the start of the pandemic, because now everyone is doing everything online. It's not ideal. We are social creatures, the VCs, and we like seeing people in person. I'm not gonna lie. So this is a bit of a challenge for us. We prefer always to see people in person, but obviously that's not entirely possible right now. We actually have. So last year at LAUNCHub, we made a couple of investments when we saw the teams. So we made an investment in a Greek company that we met in Serbia, and then we made an investment in a Slovenian company that we met in Greece, just because of the travel restrictions and everything like that. So it is complicated, but that means yes, you can access venture capital all around the world. The US has been really. I mean, they are faster in adopting these things anyway. So they've been really good at meeting companies remotely. I see actually a lot of VCs starting to brag that they're doing remote-only investments now. For example, Seedcamp is one of them. They've been very vocal about doing, and I suppose they've done that even before the pandemic, but they're doing that even more now. So yeah, I guess it's easier to speak to anyone you want around the world.
But do you think that now it is possible actually to find investors or people who are able to sell your idea just remotely? It is probably the main challenge, how to sell your idea, especially when everything is only remote. And sometimes it is absolutely not possible to travel to some locations.
For sure. So you can definitely get better access, I would say. In terms of selling it, it might actually be more difficult because you don't get the advantage of meeting people in person. It's much more easier. It's much easier to convince someone of your idea and infect them with your passion, which is what most early stage founders do anyway, in order to back the company. I think we're still finding our way to work in this environment. It's not something that we've ironed out completely. So this is still work to be done, I guess. But yeah, my advice to founders is, I don't know, always put your camera on when you're speaking to people. Be as expressive as you can. I know it's really awkward, but even stuff like putting some funny background on Zoom can back your personality a little bit and show people a little bit more from what you are and who you are, because that's really important. So from a VC perspective, when we like to meet founders because we get a better idea of who the people are, how ambitious they are, how resilient they are, and stuff like that. Just get a little bit more on their personality side. For example, how capable they will be to attract talent to their company. That's very difficult to convey in a Zoom call because the purpose of the call is just, okay, it starts at 2 p.m. and finishes at 2:45, and during those 45 minutes, there's rarely room for small talk. I'm trying to introduce that as much as possible lately when I'm speaking to people. So just have a brief chat about something that's not directly related to the purpose of the call. But the truth is that most of the time you're there with a specific purpose. And you don't, because otherwise when you get an in-person meeting, while you settle into the room, you exchange a few words and you just get to have a more personal connection with people. But yeah, try to put in some additional small talk. This is another thing that was actually very shocking to me when I moved to the UK. I think they like small talk more than we do. So out of an hour's meeting, you can easily spend 45 minutes talking about life and the purpose of things and stuff like that, and then do your work in the last 15 minutes. Whereas we're much more, directly to the point. Okay, you're here for this meeting, and let's start talking about this specific thing. So, yeah.
Yes, I understand absolutely what you are trying to say. And by the way, why you came back to Bulgaria? What is the challenge here, and what exactly led you to come back? Because yes, in UK, investment capital is much more developed, and startup culture is also more developed.
Yeah, but where's the challenge in that? It's a combination of reasons of why I moved back. First of all, I wanted to go to London and get a few years of experience. Actually, originally I went there with the idea to get 1 year of experience, and I ended up staying for 4. But yeah, I felt like I got what I wanted from the UK, and then I was ready to move back. It combined well with personal things. I got married last year, so that was another reason why I moved here. But yeah, there's no. I'm not going to say there's no challenge in the UK, but it's certainly when you work in a more established environment, there's less impact you can make on the overall thing. Whereas here, I feel like we have a lot more opportunities to create a big difference. So I guess that's something that I like. With my current job and in my previous role at Microsoft as well, it was just different.
What you think is now the main challenge here in Eastern Europe? Probably to find out options to have investment capital, or to have people who to sell your idea, or something different. Can you share some insights?
Yeah, I think our main challenge is similar to what it's always been, and I guess to what it will be for a while longer. That's learning how to sell and learning how to do business. So we're great on the technical side. We create fantastic products. We still need to go a bit. We have a bit of way to go to learn more how to sell. And because we are not, most companies in Eastern Europe sell internationally from day one, which is great. I mean, it sets the right mindset. Companies in the UK, companies in France, they start with their home market, and it's much more difficult for them to go international. Whereas for us, it's kind of natural from day one. Like if you focus on the Bulgarian market alone or on the Serbian market alone, it's a small market. You're not going to go too far. So we have to have this global mindset from day one. But that also makes it more difficult because oftentimes your clients aren't in where you are. So you need to learn to communicate cross borders with different cultures and so on. And sales don't necessarily come naturally to us. Otherwise, in terms of access to funding, I believe we're well covered. So we have quite a few funds in Bulgaria, in Romania, in Serbia, Slovenia. They all have a few funds each, and there's quite a lot of money. In terms of having access to capital, I think we're good. But yeah, just more on the sales side. We had actually a meeting with our portfolio last week, and it was closely after one of our portfolio companies raised a really nice Series B round. It's a company called GTM Hub. Some of you may have heard it. And they raised a $30 million Series B round recently from a US investor. And we had a lot of questions with the portfolio, like, what did you do to raise that round? What is your secret and stuff like that? And essentially, the secret is they build a great business, they build a great product, and they manage to sell it well. And then they didn't have, that's the outsider's perspective, but they didn't have any trouble attracting capital.
Do you think that there are some differences between different countries in CEE? I mean, if you have some vision, which are the more specific things, for example, for Bulgaria and for some other places, because you know the whole market here.
Yeah, sure. So this is why actually I really enjoy my current role at LAUNCHub, because we invest across the region. So LAUNCHub started with a Bulgarian focus, but now has expanded to the whole region of CE. So I get to have a look at a lot of different countries. In terms of differences, I think there are slight differences in terms of the verticals in which we specialize. So, for example, Slovenia is great at doing innovations in the medical tech space, in blockchain. For some reason, they specialize in that. I still haven't found out why, those two particular fields. Serbia, for example, is great at gaming. I don't know if you know, but they have several companies. They have 2 or 3 companies in the gaming space that were sold for more than $150 million that got acquired. Those news maybe don't reach us so much, but yeah, they're doing good. Romania is starting to specialize a lot in automation. Probably a lot of people get inspired by UiPath, but we see a lot of companies from Romania focusing on some form of automation. Greece, you might guess it, they're really keen on tourism and stuff like that. But yeah, in Bulgaria, we're coming up with some good stuff in business productivity. So like GTM Hub does, GTM focus on a product that helps companies establish OKRs. We are emerging as a as a hub for fintech, which is, it turns out that our regulation favors companies in that space. There's a bunch of companies working in blockchain space. I'm sure that people driving around Sofia have seen a lot of the Nexo ads. Yeah, blockchain as well, prop tech, which is great for me because the previous fund that I used to work for was focused on prop tech, so technology in the real estate. I would say the main difference between the countries is in the vertical that they specialize. Otherwise, I think culturally we're pretty similar in terms of skill set. We're very similar.
I suppose that also you have some startups which are distributed. I mean that founders can be not only from one location, and probably it is something interesting.
Yes, actually, we have, and you can see that everywhere. More and more companies are starting to recruit outside of their home country, either even for development talent. People are starting to look in other countries just because it's so scarce. You have to be creative. Oftentimes, companies get started in one of our countries, but then they hire sales talent in another country, usually in the bigger hubs like London, the US. Depends on the market, really. We have I'll go back to GTM Hub. Sorry, it's just a really fresh example in my mind, but 70% of their staff is actually not based in Bulgaria. So about 30% of the people are based here and 70% are based in other countries. And in one company that we're investing in now, we haven't finalized the investment yet, but the team is based between Serbia, Slovenia, and Estonia. It's a blockchain-related company as well. So they've spread out as well. It's very common, and I think startups are really they don't seem to find it very difficult to work cross border. Once you get that first hire outside of your office, it seems to go very smoothly.
Do you think that we can also share some details from which regions are the biggest investors here, let's say in Bulgaria, regarding to startups?
You mean in terms of funds or in terms of companies that raise capital?
In terms of funds.
Yes, sure. So in terms of funds, there's so we view the funding environment in the following way. There's locally based funds, same as a few examples from Bulgaria would be Vidsha Ventures, Brightcap. I don't know about New Ventures. I'm not sure about them. Innovation Capital as well. 11 to an extent. So those would be funds that are based here. For example, for Romania, there's Early Game Ventures, and a bunch of others. There's actually quite a few funds there as well. The Gapminder is another one. There's a bunch in Greece like Metavallen, Venture Friends. I'm not going to name all of them, but this is like one category of funds that we see. Often they are based in the local environment. They know the local environment in and out, and they want to back companies within the certain country. They are typically slightly earlier stage, so they would fund pre-seed and seed stage of companies. So that means from the point where you have an idea and a team up to the point where you need more capital to grow. And yeah, just in terms of money, that's usually below 1 million euro, with exceptions, of course. And then there's regional funds, which would be the bigger funds like Speed Invest, for example. Although Speed Invest has very broad kind of scope of investments. And Early Bird is probably the biggest one or the most well-known in our region. They're actually a German fund. But they do quite a lot of work in the region. They're one of the early backers of Upath, so they've become, like a household name in the region. There's Credo Ventures from Czech Republic. A new one, or a relatively new one, is called OTB Ventures. They are cross-border as well. Another one is Flashpoint. But yeah, then there's the regional funds, and we actually. They have the capacity to back later seed in Series A companies, predominantly for the Series A, and we actually position ourselves sort of between those two. So we are cross-regional, and we back late seed stage companies. So we like to think that we bridge the gap between the very early stage pre-seed companies with no product, very little traction, and the companies that already have the sales machine established and are looking to scale. In terms of fund sizes, they vary, I would say, but yeah, there's plenty of money. They vary from like 10 million to, in some of the local funds, to 200 million, like Early Birds Fund. And we are, again, somewhere in the middle. We've just closed 44 million in funding, and we'll be adding about 25 more, I suppose. So we're aiming for 70 later this year. So we're getting somewhere in the middle.
Can you compare the startup ecosystem, like Grow, if there is Grow, last 1.5 years, and especially during the new situation, and what was in the past? Because actually probably many people do not have the right vision, the realistic vision, what is changed, and is there some Grow or not? What is the situation?
The good thing about venture capital is that it's a non-cyclical business, so we can fund companies to a large extent regardless of the economic environment. The surprising thing that's happened last year is that actually tech companies have been having a good run. In March last year, we expected carnage in all of the companies. For example, we asked all of our portfolio companies to assess the situation, have a disaster scenario and all of that. Everyone was really, really skeptical, and then in the end, everyone outperformed even their growth trajectory that they had planned before the pandemic. I think the reason for that is, first of all, people got a bit of a downtime during the pandemic when we weren't so focused on day-to-day work stuff, but where we could actually take a bird's eye view over things and consider how to improve that. And for company and in a lot of the cases, people reached the conclusion that yes, they need to do the digital transformation that we've been talking about for so long. and they can invest in tech to position themselves better for the future. One example is co-working spaces. For example, we have another portfolio company in the space called Office R&D. They make software for managing co-working spaces, and we thought, well, that business is going to dive. And they didn't. Actually, it turned out that a lot of the co-working spaces wanted to take this time and use this opportunity to actually upgrade their system. So it was actually a great year for them. So from a business perspective, yes, most of the companies have actually grown. And yeah, they've been doing well. From a funding perspective, I think there was a bit of an initial shock where we were, you know, how I told you that we like to meet people in person. But yeah, after the initial shock, we were like, okay, let's just get on with it. We'll have to do this for a while. So I would say I'm positive about startup land. Don't know about big companies. A lot of them have had to do some cost optimization because that's usually what they do. So yeah, I don't know if you're following financial markets, but there was an initial dip in something like April, where things were looking like they're going to crash massively, but that was for about 2 weeks, and it's been growing ever since. So the market has actually grown by about, I don't know, 15 to 20% over the last year, which is impressive.
Do you think that there is some movement around ideas from startups and probably some areas which are affected from the crisis, from the COVID pandemic, are probably with less new players, less new startups? For example, my expectation is that we will have probably not many startups in travel and hospitality, but we will have much more regarding to video conferencing, telemedicine, and such kind of things.
Yeah, there is definitely an increased interest in the medical space, and by medical I mean all sorts of things. So there's diagnostics companies, telemedicine, as you mentioned, educational stuff for doctors and for patients, remote monitoring of patients and stuff like that. There's a lot of that. It had started from before. I guess now it's an easier thing to imagine how that could come to reality. We had a lot of companies pitch something like digital avatars. So instead of us looking at each other from a camera perspective, we could each have a digital twin, essentially. And digital twins has been a trend, especially in prop tech. So this is like a massive trend in prop tech. People want to create a digital representation of the physical world, and we're increasingly moving in that direction. And we saw a lot of that in the human digital twins space last year. A lot of projects, not so many people who have realized them yet, but I guess it's not been enough time. Travel has surprisingly not been bad. So we made an investment before the start of the pandemic. You know, that Greek company that we met in Serbia, that was a travel company. And they digitize the ferry ticket sales industry. And we were like, we really had a discussion about whether we should invest, because it was clear that they're not going to have a great year. But they saw actually a massive increase in domestic travel. So instead of having like 70% of their customers come from abroad, they saw a lot of that shift to domestic travel. So I think we're slowly realigning. There's certainly, things that, I don't know, we'll see how things go long term. Currently, the news is good, but we don't know how long that's gonna be, because I think everyone was prepared to have a pandemic for about a year. We kind of all wrote off 2020. I don't know how that's gonna continue to develop. I'm hoping with the vaccine things will improve, but let's see. So we might start seeing the effects of the pandemic over this year or even the next year.
understand. And there is another interesting question, actually, how your fund is helping startups. We actually try to have no marketing events, and it is not about some kind of positioning, but it will be important for startups and companies to understand really how you can help them in specific cases to find capital, to grow in some specific direction. Probably if you can explain some main
Sure, I
ideas,
can.
it will be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll abstract it a little bit so it's not that much marketing, but I'll turn the question around what you should be looking for in a VC before you take their money. Everyone says that they're value-add investors, including us. But you should really verify that, I would say. A few things to have in mind and what you can expect from a VC to help you. One is the obvious funding. So, yes, we want to be more than money, but money is kind of the essence of our business. So we need to be able to back you at the current round of funding that you're raising and also have the capacity to back you in the future rounds. You might not need it, and you might be oversubscribed in your next rounds, which is ideally what will happen if your business is doing good. But I think the capacity for your current investor to back you in the future round, because if you're growing and things are going well, you'll have no trouble finding investors. But if things hit a slow run or something like that, you need additional help from your current investors. So one of the things to look for is the capacity of the VC you're talking to follow. And then the non-tangible things that go beyond the money. If you can, look for an investor who has expertise in your field and who has worked either directly in the field that you're working in or has portfolio companies in that space. There are transcending skill sets like, sales, tech, all the customer support, all the usual components for building a business that you don't need to, any VC should be able to help you with that and give you advice. But if there's somebody with specific links to your industry or somebody who can support you additionally with experience, that's the better option, I would say. So go for someone who knows your field, knows the people in your field, and can support you in that. And with advice, and we're not going to do the work for you, just to be clear, but we can give plenty of advice. So make sure that the advice you're getting is relevant and coming from experience rather than generic common sense stuff that you can figure out on your own. The other thing that you should be looking for help with is hiring. One of the major issues that most companies share in Eastern Europe, in the UK, everywhere, is the challenge in finding good people for your business. So, because businesses are built by people, they're not built, by some asset or technology or something like that. It's the people that make the business, and the most difficult thing for an early stage company is to find the people, because it's one thing to recruit on behalf of Microsoft. It's a much easier sell because everyone knows what Microsoft is, right? But when you're a company that is early stage, you're probably small, not a lot of people have heard of you. You need to convince people to come and work for a small company. There's a degree of risk associated with that and stuff like that. So if you can get help on that side, that would make a massive difference for your business. And of course, there's follow-on funding, which is back to the money bit. Good VCs will be able to introduce you to next level investors. We get a lot of introductions from all those funds that come at the earlier stage. We often get a lot of good introductions from them to fund their companies, and we do the same for our company. So we pass them on to the next level investors that we work with. They're mostly in the larger hubs, like mostly London in the US, I think. But yeah, look for that as well. And one thing that nobody ever thinks of doing, but I can't stress it enough, do referencing on the VC before you take their money. Speak to some of their portfolio companies. They do due diligence on you, do it on them as well.
Yes, it is very important, I think, for people from startups. And in the end, probably if you can give some recommendations and insights for people who are starting now with different ideas, how they can go ahead and to have better chance for success.
I think the most convincing thing to show to an investor is traction. I know it's difficult in the beginning to get traction before you have money, but anything you can show that backs your story, whether it's user reviews, just some happy first clients and stuff like that, or anything that backs your word, because of course you as a founder will go and say this is great, everybody will love it, but if somebody actually has put money behind it, or they tell you that they love it from a client perspective, that's really important. It makes a huge difference when you're looking at companies. I would say the one thing that we look at a lot is actually the team. We look for a few things. We look for ambitious founders, people that are hungry, that want to make a big business, that really can't wait to get out there. We need to see that ambition and that drive. And I'll give you an example. A lot of times people come and say, I will quit my full-time job when I raise funding, which unfortunately doesn't work, because we need to know that you believe in this enough to bet your income on that. Because if you don't do that, nobody else will, probably. So make sure you yourself as a founder have the necessary drive, and pair up with people who also look in the same direction as you. So don't bet on credentials, bet on execution skills when you're building your team, and make sure you actually really like the people that you're going to be working with, because that's at least a 5 to 10 year affair. You can't just quit anytime you like, or if one of the founders decides that this is no longer interesting, they go away. Don't make sure you like the people that you are going to start a business with, and you want to work together. That's the most important thing. And I can keep going, but most of all, and this is one of my learnings from changing a few jobs, make sure you work with people you like. There is no point in doing something with people that you're not sure about, or that you're like, oh, I'll kind of keep with that. But
definitely, it is something very important. So, Raya, thank you very much for coming. It was really great to talk with you, and I think it was also very, very useful for all attendees. For now, I do not see some specific questions, but I suppose that if someone later consider to ask something, it is easy to find Raya. Raya Yunakova is one of the people who can give you recommendations about how to run your business, a startup company in the region, and probably not only in the region.
yeah, I actually see a couple of questions. Maybe I don't know if you can see the chat.
Let's see. Yes, now yes. Okay, so probably we can start with any kind of order depending on your preferences. Yes.
I'll start with the top one because it's the quickest one to answer, probably. I've seen traction as the most overused word in Bulgarian VC space. What's your definition of traction? I think that's true for any VC. Everyone's like, oh, you're too early, we need more traction. What's the definition of traction? It depends on the stage where you're fundraising. I would say make sure there's people who like what you're doing and are prepared to put money behind it. Now, that the scale of that depends on the level where you're fundraising. If you're just starting and you're raising a pre-seed or a first seed round, traction can mean have a couple of test clients, have a couple of proof of concept implementations with some people. have a first version of the product. That's the bare minimum. I think you're going to find it challenging to raise from VCs in Europe if you don't have a first version of the product, or at least some version of it. And then as you go along with the later stages of funding, traction is the repeatable business that you generate. So at first you start with a couple of interested parties that have given you some money for the product. And then you need more than a couple. You need people to come to you without you chasing them, or you need some repeatable process where you close deals. But at the very first step, I would say traction would be a first version of the product and a couple of enthusiastic clients that have paid you money. I'm insisting on the money not because of the revenue point, but because that shows real intent to purchase, and that's a validation for your point. I hope that answers the question. And then there's another one about an advisory board. Is it becoming more popular in CEE? I would argue on the side of, I would advise you to be on the side of caution when building an advisory board, just because there's plenty of people that want to be advisors. But as we have this saying, too many chefs spoil the broth, or in Bulgarian, too many grandmothers make the baby too thin. Yeah, it's not compulsory by any means. Make sure if you get an advisor, they can actually contribute. They know your they know your field. They can help you with the recruitment. They can help you with finding the right clients, investors, and so on. And to answer the question directly, no, I haven't seen it that massively in CE compared to the UK, for example. Okay.
There is another one, yeah, about I think you see it about a person who wants to fund an idea, for example.
Yeah, but they are cautious about talking about it. Feel free to talk about your idea. Trust me, no VC will ever take your idea and go implement it themselves. If we wanted to do that, we would make our own startups and not be VCs. So from that side, you're safe. The valuable thing about a company is the execution. It's not the idea. The idea because we all have great ideas, but so few of us actually implement them. Yeah, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. So I think you can safely discuss your idea very broadly. The chances of somebody stealing it or hearing something at an event or in a meeting that they like so much that they want to dedicate 5 to 10 years of their life 24/7 to make it is so slim. You would do that if it's your own idea. You probably wouldn't overhear it somewhere and decide, oh, I should do that. It's just not going to happen. So I would encourage you to speak comfortable speaking about that. Get as much feedback as you can before starting to build something. This is another thing that we tend to do in CE. We rush to create the product without actually having validated it before that, and we spend a lot of time in development, which then might turn out not to be so interesting for clients. So, yeah, I genuinely don't think anyone will steal your idea. So, go ahead and tell everybody about it. Find support in the form of co-founders or investors or clients. And that's really the best thing you can do with your idea.
I think we have no more questions.
Yeah,
Nice
I've been speaking English for quite a while. I couldn't pick up the British accent. This was my goal when I went to London, but yeah, I gave up. So it's very difficult. But thank you.
So I think that that's all for today. Thank you one time more, and I hope that we can have also in the future more conversations around startups, because I believe in this culture and I think that we need to grow the ecosystem here in Bulgaria and the whole region. And yes, if someone needs some advices, probably you can contact Raya.
Yeah, absolutely, by all means. Raya at LAUNCHub is my email. I'm very easy to find on all the social media channels. So yeah, feel free to ping me. If you're looking for a more work-related conversation, probably LinkedIn or my email are the best places to go. Yeah.
If it is fine, we can actually add your contacts to the event page, so people will be able to contact you.
Yeah, happy to. Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Bye and have a nice evening.
Thanks, you too. Have a nice evening, everyone, and best of luck with whatever you're doing. I know it's great, so I want to hear about it.